Shalom again to everybody. This is our second meeting in the series dealing with Rav Kook's letters. We call the series When Children Begin to Stray Away, meaning when children start distancing themselves from their traditional religious, orthodox, ultra-Orthodox parents. We're studying Rav Kook's letters to Dov Ber Milstein. In our first meeting, our first shiur, I gave a background about the whole topic, and we learned the first letter. Basically, this is the story of Dov Ber Milstein, who was a chassid, and he had three boys, and the first was a devoted chassid like his father, but the second and third children, they were straying away, and there was a generational gap between the father and his sons, and the father had a rebbe, an admor, who told him that he should be very tough with his kids until they come back to a full frum way of life. And he luckily met Rav Kook in a visit then called Palestine, Eretz Israel, in 1906. And when he met Rav Kook told him the exact opposite. He said, you got to be loving and care with care and affection to your children. And then we studied the first letter. So Milstein has to decide between the two contradictory pieces of advice he gets, one from his Rebbe and one from his, you could maybe say, his new Rebbe, Rav Kook. And Rav Kook, like we explained last time, from letter to letter, he deepens our understanding of the way he perceived the whole changes, the whole process of changes we're going through in our generations, because what happened in the Milstein family, in a nutshell, was what was happening in all of Klal Yisrael. And it was a very big thing, and it still is. It's still going on. We're not in the exact same place we were over 100 years ago, but we are still in the midst of the same process, which is how to combine our tradition and our core value system of Judaism, both in emunah, both in our beliefs, and in our practice, in our mitzvot, how to combine that with the world around us, the modern world. And this is something we're still dealing with, and therefore this is not a study in history. Rather, this is very relevant to chinuch and to our way in life today. And it also gives us a glimpse of who Rav Kook really was and how deep his thoughts were, and we're trying to get into that. So today we're going to begin with the second letter. It's called letter 113, Igeret Kuf Yud Gimel. It was written in 1908, meaning some time went by. And in this letter, I explained last time that I use AI named Claude to translate these letters, but I also go through the translation and make corrections where needed. So let's begin with God's help. Holy city of Jaffa. Rav Kook was then the rabbi of Jaffa and the Moshavot, meaning the new yeshuv in Eretz Israel, made, be built and established 11th of Adar 5668. This is 1908. Shalom uvracha, peace, blessing, and healing to the spirit, etc. To my honored friend, the distinguished rabbi and pious man, our teacher and Rabbi Dov Ber Halevi Milstein, may he live long. I renew greetings of peace. Days and weeks have passed since I received your precious letter. Meaning, Rav Kook, after the letter we studied last time, Milstein wrote Rav Kook back, and some months transpired, and he didn't write an answer. And now, both because he was busy, but also because additional reasons we're about to read. Indeed, I delayed greatly in answering it. Let my friend believe that your precious words and the expression of your pain also grieved my heart. If he's expressing pain, this means that the process of estrangement that his sons were going through strengthened, meaning Rav Kook's advice didn't help bring the kids closer. On the contrary, they were taking more and more steps farther further away from traditional Judaism. And therefore, Milstein apparently wrote, and we don't have Milstein's letters, but he apparently wrote that, he's full of pain because it's not working. And I was stunned, says Rav Kook, and did not know what to answer. However, afterwards, I said, meaning it's not that I didn't care. Usually when somebody doesn't answer, or he ghosts you, like we call it today, it means he doesn't care much for you. So Rav Kook says, on the contrary, it grieved my heart. I was stunned. I didn't know what to answer. What can I say? However, afterwards, I settled that silence is not good, especially since my humble opinion concludes that we must not despair at all from any son of Israel. En Yeush ba'olam klal, said Rabbi Nachman. There's definitely shouldn't be any Yeush, any despair from a son of Israel, a part of Am Yisrael, of Klal Yisrael. And then he quotes the pasuk, Gam ki yeshev b'choshech Hashem or li. Even when I sit in darkness, the Lord, Hashem, is a light to me. I'm not exactly sure what he means when he quotes this pasuk. Either it refers to the Father, meaning, though you are sitting in darkness, meaning that things seem dark and your kids are still straying away, you should believe, Hashem or li, you should believe in Hashem's Yeshua, and maybe in the godly, divine light, in the neshama of your children. Or it might refer directly to the sons themselves. They're sitting in the darkness, but Hashem is a light to them. Whatever he meant by quoting this pasuk, I think the first one is makes more sense. Whatever he meant by quoting this pasuk, he says, to despair, that's not a solution at all. Therefore, I will reveal to you that although indeed, if your sons were connected at least to the Jewish nation in their thinking, and were lovers of Zion or Zionists, it would be easier to return them to the strength of Hashem's way. So this is only the beginning of a longer sentence. One of the difficulties in deciphering Rav Kook's writing is that the sentences are often long. Somebody once told me that this is the German style. I don't know in German, so I wouldn't be able to confirm that. But anyway, we're going to break this sentence down to parts because this is the main part of our shiur, this sentence. It's very important. So, who were the lovers of Zion? We know who the Zionists were. They were adherents of the Zionist movement of Theodor Herzl, which was established in 1896, 1897. As we know, this letter is being written in 1908. Herzl was no longer with us. He passed away in 1904, but the Zionist movement was a thing and growing stronger in Europe. So we know what Zionists are. But what are the lovers of Zion? So the lovers of Zion, Chovevei Tzion, that was like the Zionism that was a bit before Zionism. Meaning after the rough pogroms in the early 1880s in Russia. Remember that in the 1880s, Rov Minyan and Rov Binyan, arguably Rov Binyan, meaning the majority, number-wise, and maybe the more quality, high-quality part of the Jewish nation, they were stuck in Russia. Millions of Jews were in Russia. And there was a lot of persecution and anti-Semitism, sometimes arranged by the government, and sometimes just good old-fashioned Jew hatred. So it was becoming more and more difficult to be a Jew in that area, and there was therefore millions of Jews were fleeing Tsarist Russia. Most of them winded up in the United States. That's why we have a large Jewish population in the U.S. today. But a few of them also reached Eretz Israel. And many of them were Chovevei Tzion, meaning they had formed all kinds of groups called, here, they even have this in the Wikipedia, Lovers of Zion, Chovevei Tzion. They were a variety of proto-Zionist organizations founded in 1881 in response to the anti-Jewish pogroms in the Russian Empire. The organizations are now considered the forerunners and foundation builders of modern Zionism. So Chovevei Tzion and Zionists that's very similar. They're very similar. And Rav Kook, we understand from this letter that the Milstein kids, they were not only estranged from the Jewish religious values, they were also estranged from Jewish national values, meaning it's not like they were turning away from religion to embrace the idea of Jewish nationality, which was then considered by many to be something opposite of the religious way of life. You know, there were a lot of secular. The majority of the Zionist movement was secular. Some of it outright anti-religion, and that's because they were very national, and they believed that to rebuild Israel, you got to form a new kind of Jew, which is not at all like the religious traditional Jew of the Galut, of the diaspora. So we understand from this letter that these kids were not attracted to Zionism or to Jewish national values. Like we said last time, they were attracted apparently to socialism, maybe even mild communism, and maybe also some kind of version of Polish nationalism. So Rav Kook says it would be easier to return them to religion if they were connected at least to the lovers of Zion or Zionists, because there is a great connection between national recognition recognition. All right, I don't have a better word to offer. Hakara leumit, you know, to have a national perspective, a thought pattern. There's a great connection between national recognition in Israel and the root of holiness, of Kedusha, in faith and observance of Torah and commandments. Meaning, in Rav Kook's perception, this is why his followers are considered today to be dati leumi, the religious side and the national side of connection to Am Yisrael. These are two sides of the same coin. They're intertwined. And we can definitely see that. Maybe in the beginning of Zionism, there was a certain separation between, for many people, between the religious values and the national values. Today we see that they're much more together. Meaning, where you see strong national values, people who are very patriotic, whether they be Israelis or they be Jews in Chutz La'aretz, but very connected to Israel, they're usually going to have a more positive approach to Jewish tradition. They might not keep kashrut or Shabbat or wear tefillin every day, but when they have a chance, they'll put on the tefillin, they'll go to the kotel. They feel a connection because Jewish values, traditional religious values, and national values, they come together. And it should be vice versa, meaning if you're very religious, you should care much about Am Yisrael, about Medinat Yisrael. That's also changing. And improving, though we're currently in Israel in the process of a very big clash between the Haredi Torah world and the will to them to take part in the IDF. So we still have our our gaps. But generally speaking, today it's very clear that these two systems of values, the national and the religious, they usually go together. So therefore, if your children would have been estranged to the religious way of life, but connected to national ideals and values, it would be easier to hope for them to return to their religious values as well. There's a great connection. Rav Kook sees it as a Omek HaNeshama, deep in the soul of Am Yisrael, these values are connected. Nevertheless, even now that they have gone far astray, meaning they not only left their religious way of life, but they're also not connected to national values, Jewish particular values. And by the way, of course, there are many Jews who believe in values that are connected to Tanakh and to our tradition, but they're today universal. That's the whole Tikkun Olam thing, right? Tikkun Olam, of course, Tikkun Olam should be connected to the next two words, which is Tikkun Olam and Malchut Sharai. But the whole idea of Tikkun Olam, which was embraced by liberal Jews and by the Reform movement, and I once visited Reform Jewish school in Boston, and everywhere you saw Tikkun Olam, and maybe you could remember President Barack Obama, who people used to humorously say, people usually on the left wing, that he's the first American Jewish president. So He also used to speak about tikkun olam because he was influenced by this ideal that he heard from his Jewish friends and counterparts. So I just wanted to say that when Rav Kook is speaking about to be connected to the Jewish nation's values, it's not tikkun olam, because tikkun olam is universal. The fact that it originates in Tanakh, and you might quote a prophet to speak about tikkun olam, doesn't make it unique or particular for the Jewish nation. When you're speaking about the elevation of all of mankind and the brotherhood between all people in the world, I believe in that, and that's part of our Torah. That's also part of our Torah values. And yet, like I said, it's not particular. Meaning, to believe in that, you don't have to be connected directly to the national aspirations and ambitions of the Jewish nation. So, as a matter of fact, you might find yourself an opposer of the State of Israel and the IDF and like the war in Gaza in the name of these values. And you might be a Jew connecting them theoretically to the Jewish. But you understand, these aren't, today they're not Jewish national values. They have their foundation in Judaism. They're a part of Judaism. We believe in them, but they're not unique and they don't connect you to the Jewish nation as a nation. So, like we said, even now that they have gone far, I'm saying this because the whole idea of these igrot is to tell these children, to tell these young adults, maybe we should call them, to tell these young adults that the things that they believe in, they're not contradictory to Torah, and it's actually opposite. They're connected, they're intertwined with Torah. So we believe in these values. When we say that they went very far astray and now they believe in socialist values, the idea of equality and progress for all mankind, we're not against these ideas. We're actually a bit critical about our Torah education not including them. Maybe not the way, definitely not the way the socialist movement defined them, but basically the heart of the root of these values, they're also connected to Torah. And yet we still say that they've gone far astray, because if you continue with this way of life and with this thought pattern, you're going to end up probably not being a part of the Jewish nation, and definitely not part of our national aspirations. So, even now that they have gone far astray, one must not despair of them at all. So, this is an immensely important passage in this letter. That's why I'm going to talk about it quite a bit, because this sentence here in this letter, it actually disproves something that is believed by many of the people who are taught the Rav Kook thought system, and I'll explain what I mean. So the way that, I don't remember if I mentioned this in our last meeting or not, but Torah Lishma is Torah really Lishma is a bit rare. Usually when people in Chinuch are teaching Torah, I'm not speaking about lo lishma in the low form of it. I'm speaking about, people, they have an educational goal that they want to reach when they're teaching Torah. And that includes people who are teaching the Torah of Rav Kook, meaning it's less important to them to explain exactly what Rav Kook said. They're struggling for their students to embrace a certain way of life. Okay, and they want to promote a certain ideology, and sometimes it's political. In the Rav Kook yeshiva world, the political is connected to the Torah, and sometimes you don't know exactly where to put the border between them. And therefore, there was a big mistake in the way people taught the Rav Kook's ideas about the generation, Hador, the secular Jews, and I'll explain. It was usually taught as a trade-off, meaning you, our secular brothers and sisters, you might no longer be religious, and we have a problem with that. just as the Haredi world has a problem with that. But you are very national, you are very Zionist. You go to the army and you have Mesirut Nefesh to rebuild Eretz Israel and later on Medinat Israel and take a part in the reestablishment of this important, the most important thing going on in the world in our eyes, of Medinat Israel. And since we believe in Medinat Israel, and since you're fulfilling that purpose of strengthening the state of Israel, we can be a bit forgiving to you that you strayed away from the religious value system, because you do have the national value system. And therefore, we, the Dati Leumi, we can work together with the secular. If in the Haredi world, they'll usually have a very negative approach to secular people and the secular way of life especially. So we in the Tzionut Datit, in the Dati Leumi world, we work together with the seculars. Why? Because we have a common core. It's not the religious common value system, but it's a national value system. So like I said, it's a certain trade-off. You're less in the religious sense, but you're more in the national sense. So that's the way Rav Kook's thought system was usually taught. And this is a grave mistake, and it has a ramification. The ramification is when the secular part of the population became less national in its views, then the religious Zionism found themselves saying, you know, if they're not Dati, they're not so Leumi as they used to be. Now, of course, the seculars in Israel still are very Zionist, but there is a difference between the secular Jews in Israel, like the first generation of Israel, and today it's a bit different. The dedication, the Mesirut Nefesh to the country, to the army, it's not the same as it was. And in some of the secular population, the more liberal and the leftists, the heavy leftists, they're even sometimes, you know, the Haaretz kind of people. Haaretz, the Israeli newspaper, which causes a lot of trouble to the state of Israel because it's very critical about the Zionism, about the state of Israel, about the IDF. So usually people who are taught Rav Kook the way I mentioned before, they don't know what to do with these people. They will often be very negative in their relation to them because, like I said, you know, the only reason we let you off the hook, so to speak, in the religious sense is because you're very national. But if you're not national anymore, then what are you? You're not lo dati, lo leumi. You're just worthless or even causing much damage. So that's the result of the misunderstanding, the widespread mistake, which is the topic of this shiur, a widespread mistake. This is the widespread mistake, thinking that Rav Kook was only speaking about the people with strong national values. Rav Kook definitely saw a high value in people who have strong national values. And like he says here, when they have strong national values, they're definitely closer to traditional Judaism than the people who don't have this or that. That's true. But we see here specifically, in this letter to Milstein, in all of these letters to Milstein, he's saying, your sons, you shouldn't despair from them, even if they don't have the national connection to Zionism. We're not even speaking about the difference between the right and the left political camps in Israel, because right and left in Israel, they're Zionists. These kids weren't Zionists at all. They were totally, with totally different ideas. And yet Rav Kook says, my basic idea, my basic belief in their neshama, in the kedusha that we're going to speak about in the next letters, that's inherently a part of them, that's unchanged. So Rav Kook's thought system is relevant to the whole generation. You can't write an essay called Hador, speaking about the generation, and only refer to those few thousands who were living then in Eretz Israel. The vast majority of the generation, when Rav Kook is writing this in the early, in the beginning of the 20th century, the vast majority of the generation wasn't Zionist at all. they were straying away both from religious values and from national values. And some of them were becoming assimilated, and some of them were becoming reform, and many of them were becoming socialists and communists, and we're going to speak about the Bund soon, the Bundists. So if Rav Kook, his writings and teachings, they're relevant to the whole generation, to the whole door. Now, we're not talking about all kinds of really extreme people who were totally became like auto-anti-Semites and self-hating Jews, and there is a certain limit, of course. There is a certain... But the basic core ideas are relevant to all parts of the Jewish nation. And this is the essence. This is like the pure Rav Kook thought system. And therefore, to elaborate about this a bit, I want to study with you now a letter. This letter was written by Rav Kook's son, Tzvi Yehuda. In the Rav Kook yeshivas, usually the general agreement is that Rav Tzvi Yehuda was his most important talmid. He was the person who went in, who continued Rav Kook's derech. Of course, there are a few people who think differently in the Torah world, and there are many people who think differently in the academia, in the universities. But usually Rav Kook students saw Rav Tzvi Yehuda. I definitely perceive him as the most important person who continued. So when Rav Tzvi Yehuda says something, we see it as something that his father would say as well. Of course, there were differences between them. We could speak about this some other time. But basically, it's considered by us the same thought system. Now, I even say that Rav Tzvi Yehuda was more of a Kooknik than Rav Kook, because he was born into it. Rav Kook wasn't born into the Rav Kook way of thought. He had to establish it. He had different influences in his life, and he had to pave the way. And it was difficult for him to pave the way, as he himself testifies. But Rav Tzvi Yehuda was born into the atmosphere and the thought system and the belief system of Rav Kook. So he was a very, very serious Kooknik. Anyway, Rav Tzvi Yehuda writes this letter to Yosef Chaim Brenner. Yosef Chaim Brenner was an important author and editor, and he was one of the leaders of the Elyashiv, the second Aliyah to Eretz Israel. That's the way historians divide it. You can, some people think otherwise. But anyway, the second Aliyah was the one who was much more opposed to religion than the first Aliyah. The first Aliyah, they were usually traditional Jews, some religious, some just traditional, and naturally, because they were more focused in agriculture and development of the land, they couldn't be as strict Orthodox as the ones who were only studying Torah in the yeshiva world, but basically they were pretty close to tradition. They didn't have good spiritual guidance, they didn't have rabbanim who knew how to elevate this, so they were also taking smaller steps away from tradition, but it wasn't some ideology that was based on opposition to religion and to belief. But in the Aliyah Shniya, we had some strong figures, and they were very much opposed to religion. Here we do have the ideology that that is opposed to Torah and to Emunah. And one of the most serious leaders of this movement was Yosef Chaim Brenner. And when Rav Tzvi Yehuda writes this letter to him, he's not Rav, he's just Tzvi Yehuda. He's about 16 years old. In 1908, the same exact era that we're studying in this series. And let's see what he writes in this letter to Brenner, why he's writing this letter. Let's see. My honored, first of all, see how he writes, how he addresses him at the beginning, in the introduction. My honored and most exalted sir, the distinguished writer, Yosef Chaim Brenner, may you live long. Peace to you. This is a strong opening. By the way, Brenner is a kadosh. He was killed in the riots of, was it 1918? I should have checked this up. But there were riots, one of the first, every few years, they call it different names, but basically it's an intifada, an uprising of the local Arabs in Eretz Israel, in which they murdered and attacked Jews, and Brenner was living in Yafo, and he was killed in one of these attacks. So he's actually a casualty of the Israeli-Arab conflict. Of course, this was before 1948, before there was a Nakba, before there was a Nakhsa, before there was the occupation of the so-called West Bank. This is all Arab propaganda. The opposition to Jews in Eretz Israel was the hostility and also the ruthlessness and the terrible acts of terror. These all preceded the establishment of the State of Israel. Anyway, let's get back to the letter to Brenner. I received your letter, and I'm very grateful to you for your trouble in answering me. And I am sending you the book Ikve Atzon. Ikve Atzon is the book. It's a small book, almost a booklet, I would say, but it included a few important essays. One of them was Ma'amar Hador, which we're not studying directly, but we're studying indirectly through these letters to Milstein. Rav Kook's ideas about the relations between the old and new generations. And so Rav Tzvi is sending his father's book, Ikve Atzon, to Yud Chet Brenner. And I inform you in advance and request of you that you should not merely read this book, but rather study it with deep contemplation and profound seriousness. For superficiality greatly corrupts the intention in matters of deep wisdom, meaning this isn't something you're going to read in the bathroom. You should study this book. It's deep, it's serious. Take it seriously, and by examining it repeatedly, I think you will gain new knowledge from it and even new perspectives. So he's trying to promote his father's ideas, right? And now he explains why he's doing this. And I am sending you this book not out of desire to distribute it. This is a very impressive letter. Can you imagine any 16-year-old writing a letter, especially, by the way, in the original Hebrew? It's a very impressive letter. It shows much about Rav Tzvi himself. But let's get back to the content of the letter. I'm sending you this book not out of desire to distribute it for commercial purposes, nor as the author's son who loves his father's ideals and wishes to spread them. Rather, this is a very interesting perspective, rather as a young person among the youth of our generation who possesses ideals from the remaining camp. I'm not exactly sure what he means by saying the remaining camp. In Hebrew, it's Hamachaneh Nish'ar. Now, this is definitely based on the pasuk speaking about Yaakov Avinu, who split his family into two, saying that if Esav will strike one part of the family, V'hayah Hamachaneh Nish'ar lifleta, meaning the remaining camp will survive. And therefore, he didn't put everybody together. That's why the U.S. president and the vice president are not allowed to be on the same plane, so they won't crash together. And that's also why in the IDF we always have large spaces. We should. It's not always easy to do this in practice, but we should have large spaces between soldiers moving forward, so if like a bomb hits one part of the convoy, it won't take out everybody. So it's taken from that pasuk, but I think he's referring to some term that was maybe coined by Brenner, or maybe not, but it was clear that they were speaking about a specific term. He's saying we're basically from, the reason I'm writing you is not because I'm a chassid of my father. It's because actually I'm a chassid, not a chassid of you, but I feel very close to you. I feel like we're friends. I feel like we have much in common. So a person of ideas from the remaining camp who sends choice foods to those worthy of consuming them, to his young colleague, forgive me. See, he feels as if Brenner is his colleague, and he says, forgive me, because it's like a chutzpah, because I'm only 16 years old, and I'm a nobody, and you're this important, you're an adult, and you're an important writer, so therefore he says, forgive me, but I see us as, part of the same team. And this is in itself fascinating, because like I said, Brenner was totally opposed to religion. And yet this didn't cause Rav Tzvi to feel estranged from him. On the contrary, he says, I feel like we're colleagues. We have much in common. Who is known to him from afar as his kinsman and close to his soul. Meaning we have, we want the same things. We want truth. We want justice. We want values. We don't, and we might have a difference of opinion as how to achieve all of this, but basically we are close. We are close. This in itself is much of Rav Kook's worldview. You can see it in this letter. because he should have been disgusted with somebody like Brenner if he would be a regular, strong religious person. But that's not what he's writing here, right? So, who is known to him as from afar as his kinsman and close to his soul, who is also among the idealistic youth from the remaining camp. Like we're from the same group. I was in the height of the conflict in Israel regarding the judicial reform right before October 7th broke out. We had a lot of tension here in Israel regarding the judiciary system, and I was invited to speak with they're called in Israel Demarker. Of course, their newspaper, it's a financial newspaper, and it's published by Haaretz, which is, like I said, pretty much the opposite of religious Zionism values, religious Zionist values. And so they're not Haaretz, but they're in the building of Haaretz, and they're the financial newspaper published by Haaretz. They're called, in English, The Marker, and in Israel they gave up on the because there's no the th in Hebrew, so it's called De Marker. And of course they're all leftists and they all think pretty much the same, but the editor is a friend of mine. And she invited me to speak with them, Dafka, because she knew that they never speak with anybody from the other side. So I was invited to their meeting. The journalists and the editors, I was invited to take part in their meeting as somebody from the other camp, from the other side. And so I enter the building. You know, you see the emblem of Haaretz in that building in Tel Aviv. Not a natural place for people like me to roam around. And I entered the room, and you can feel the tension in the room, meaning they're here to listen, but they definitely, they were on high alert. Me being both a settler and a rabbi, and all kinds of other things that they thought about me, some true, some maybe not true. But I began speaking with them, and I said, look, I know you invited me as somebody from the other side, but I don't feel like I'm from the other side. I feel much in common with you because I'm influenced by Rav Kook's original thought system and this letter by Rav Tziyuda. I said, look, you know, we're all in the pursuit of truth and justice and values. We all care very much about Israel. I know that you care. I'm not going to be the one who says that because you have leftist views, you're against Israel. That's not true. You think the country is going in the wrong way. So I said, you know, I told them my story, that we made Aliyah and how I started believing in the settler movement and Rav Kook's thought system. But I said, like, basically, I feel like we're on the same side. And you know, we're all here together in Medinat Israel. We all serve together in the army. Most of the Jews aren't even living here today, and we have much in common. We have many values. You know, it's a different way of looking at things. So I learned this from Rav Tziyuda. And as an introduction to the book, I bring to your attention these matters concerning the author and his book. So says Rav Tziyuda, my father, may he live long. Look how he describes his father in his lifetime. The author is among the pious rabbis. In the original Hebrew it says Rabbanim ha'adukim. Adukim isn't exactly pious. It's, I would say, old school. It's like he's a serious rabbi. He's not a modern rabbi, which is, it's okay to be a modern rabbi, but Rav Kook wasn't. He's like he's a real old school rabbi. I think that's what aduk would mean. And besides, Rav Kook didn't go to the university, he didn't have a degree. He had a lot of knowledge, but he was basically a totally immersed in Torah person. And also his way of life was very non-modern. And besides his genius in Torah, he has also earned the title of tzaddik, pious. Here it should say pious. And with this, he is also a free researcher and philosopher with no restraints before him. What kind of restraints? Meaning no restraints because he's religious. You would say that if he's so religious and so strict and so old school, then he wouldn't be allowed to have free thought and philosophically, and this is incorrect. Rav Kook writes this in different ways in his diaries, that there's a difference between yirat hachet and yirat machshava, and people mix up between them. Yirat hachet means you should definitely be very, very careful not to transgress Hashem's mitzvot. And we're not free in that sense that we can do whatever we want. But yirat machshava is something else. You shouldn't be scared of thinking. You should allow yourself free thought. That's the only way to make progress spiritually. And this is what Rav Tzvi says about him. He has no restraints before him in the fullest sense of that word. And he has extensively researched and studied the teachings of all the philosophical teachers among the nations of the world with deep knowledge. I didn't mention this, but every shiur of ours, we have a source sheet. It's very difficult to learn this shiur without the source sheet and to understand when I'm speaking on myself, by myself, and when I'm quoting the letter and what it says in the letter. So on the YouTube channel, we always post the source sheet connected to the shiur. You can find it right beneath the link to the shiur itself. Anyway, so he has penetrated the foundations of our Torah and also reached the chambers of Kabbalah. So what he's trying to say is that Rav Kook, he knows everything. He knows Torah, and he knows Torah deeply. He knows the Nigle, but he also knows the Nistar, the Kabbalah, and he also knows what's going on in the world of philosophy. This is, by the way, interesting because there's a certain machloket regarding the fact how much Rav Kook read the original philosophers. Nobody really knows. There are all kinds of different theories, but at least according to this letter, then he read the original works of the philosophers that he used to refer to. Anyway, and with a torn and boiling heart, he saw and contemplated the brokenness of his beloved people torn to pieces. And he recognized the source of all evils in people's ignorance of one another, meaning the Jewish nation had become a variety of opposing camps with a lot of hatred between the different camps. And the first thing to correct this and to improve our situation is that people get to know each other. Because when you don't know somebody and you do know that he thinks the opposite of the way you think, at least on some core essential topics, then you start to feel emotionally estranged from this group. And then you start believing in all the stereotypes. You start creating the stereotypes and believing them, and you know that causes a lot of sin'ah. This shiur specifically is being given in the 3 weeks, Ben HaMitzarim. We know that sin'at chinam is what tore us apart at the end of the era of the Second Temple, and that was what sent us off to an almost 2,000-year galut. So this is a serious problem. How to uphold the things that you believe in without creating such a wide gap that includes sin'ah and all the terrible things that happen because of hatred. We're a very small people. We have to be connected to each other. That's the most important thing, essential for Jewish survival. Doesn't matter which thought system you belong to. That's the most fundamental thing. So Rav Kook saw the basic problem in people's ignorance of one another, in their distance and lack of clear and true knowledge of each other. I always ask the question, I didn't make it up, how many when you hear somebody speaking viciously about a different group of people, you ask them, how many people do you have in your contacts and on your phone? Not on the Facebook, that's Facebook friends, that's fake. But how many people do you have in your contacts on your phone from this group? When you're speaking so viciously about, let's say, the Haredim, do you have any Haredi friends? Do you have anybody that you know personally? When you're speaking about, by the way, this is important even not only in Klal Yisrael, having Arab friends is important for me to understand the Arab population here, especially the Arab citizens who are citizens of Israel. But our discussion is now focused on the Jewish nation. The question is, if you have friends from the other camp, if you don't, maybe you shouldn't be speaking so much about them. You should be speaking with them. When you have people who are your friends, like recently there was a lot of tension regarding certain things that happened in our area here. I live in Yehuda and Shomron, and there were some bad stories publicized in the media about extremists in the settlements attacking Palestinians and attacking even IDF soldiers. And one of the things I do is I give tours to people, usually executives in Yehuda and Shomron. People, not that they're executives in Israeli society, and they come to Yehuda and Shomron to get a better understanding of what's going on here. And they come for a few days straight. I'm not speaking about one like a public relations tour for half a day. I'm speaking about people who come and study, and I go through the whole area with them, and we meet influential people and understand their ideas. And usually the people who come to these masaot, we call them journeys, they're people who they come to it not because they're connected to the settler movement, rather on the contrary, they feel opposed to it, and that's why they understand that they got to know. So they want to see it for what it is. And when these things were described in the media, we have a WhatsApp group, and one of these groups, somebody contacted me publicly and said, Netanel, you know, what's going on? We want to know what's really going on. And I told them, I gave them my perspective about the whole thing. And they were very happy, and they were very relieved that they had somebody that they can trust, who will give them a true answer. I don't whitewash things. I tell them the bad for the bad, just as I try to show them the good. And they were very happy and relieved that they have somebody that they can talk to, and not only understand, see it from biased media. So whatever group it is in our people, you should have some friends from that group. And if you don't have friends, like I said, instead of being so busy speaking about them, you should first of all get to know them. If you don't have friends from that group, I don't believe you in what you're saying about. I don't really care to hear what you're saying, because you have to criticism. We're not against criticism. It's essential to have a discussion, like it's called these days. But you should do it from the inside, not from the outside. If you're doing it from the outside, you're probably influenced by a lot of stereotypes and hatred, and that's never a good thing. And it's always easy to take the bad example of somebody from the camp that you don't feel for, right? Because everybody, each camp, we all have our kochavim, our stars, our bad examples. So it's always easier to single out the worst people from the other camp and try to take them as the example. No, I want you to single out the better people. I want you to deal with them. It's very easy when you cherry pick the bad, rotten characters in every group and reflect that to the whole group. That's not the true way to deal with things. You should take the better people and say, okay, how can I deal with these people? Because on one hand, I see that they're good people. On the other hand, I think what they're doing is very stupid or bad or harmful or whatever. So that's challenging. Challenge yourselves. Let's get back to the letter. So that's the problem. People are ignorant of one another in their distance and lack of clear and true knowledge of each other and of their possessions, spiritual possessions and aspirations. So that, for example, on one side, Judaism has become synonymous with hatred of life, idleness, and more, while education and wisdom and living aspirations have become synonymous, in the eyes of the old, with heresy, kfira, and apostasy. Meaning, from the more modern side of the Jewish nation, when you look at the religious world, it looks like something irrelevant to modern life, and like it says here, hatred of life. That's a bit extreme, right? They're against anything that has to do with living a good life, a happy life, with doing better financially and culturally and whatever. And in the eyes of the old, all the modern people and the non-traditional modern people, you immediately identify it with kfira, with secularism and disgust with holy things, when in truth all the evils of general conduct stem from confusion of systems with their adherents. That's another topic, but we're a bit short on time, so I won't get into explaining this sentence. And the rifts that were created through this and similar things have grown ever wider until our current state, the like of which we have never had, never before. What is he speaking about? Well, you know, in the past, before the modern era, you had Jews, and everybody knew that they were more traditional and less traditional. That's not something new. And there were stronger believers and less stronger believers, and there were people who were for philosophy, let's say, and being connected to the external world. And there were others who believed that we should be more confined to our inner world. And there were all kinds of different views and gaps in all the generations. But a Jew was a Jew. And that's what changed. In the era that Rav Tzvi is describing, and it's still that way till this very day, being part of a specific camp might be stronger than your general belonging to the people. Meaning, being Chiloni might be stronger than being Yehudi. Being Dati might be stronger than being Yehudi. Being, whatever you might be, that identity might be stronger. And even if it's not stronger, the fact that you have such a strong identification with a specific camp, these names of the Datim, Chilonim, Charedim, and different educational systems, and no real connection. Luckily, we have the IDF, in which we do have a connection, and that also doesn't include everybody, unfortunately. It was never so, the differentiation between these groups in our people, it was never this strong. And that's a big problem. Rav Tzvi once met with secular people in the field of education, and he said, maybe I'm not quoting it exactly, but I think I am. He said, "Kippah snu'a etzli." I hate the kippah. I hate the kippah. Why? Because wearing kippahs, it causes you to be essentially different than your fellow Jew who doesn't wear a kippah. It causes, if it's like a physical thing that. Now you got to be careful with these quotations, because of course Rav Tzvi, it's not because of this that he took off his kippah. He looked very, I don't have a picture here, but he looked pretty much like his father. Okay, he had a kippah and he had all the whole outfit and everything. So when he said I hate the kippah, he didn't mean what the kippah stands for, which is belief in Hashem and the traditional way of life. He meant the fact that it splits us into totally different camps. Not a good thing. So we should all look the same. Now, of course, us with a kippah, we can't take off our kippahs. So maybe all of you secular people, you can put on a kippah. I'm just kidding. Anyway, so we never before had this kind of situation. He came, he's speaking about his father. I'm here to remind. He came to the land of Israel 3 years ago and saw here the full ugliness of this rift. Meaning in Chutz La'aretz, they also had the maskilim who are going secular, in the secular direction, and the ultra-Orthodox. But here in Eretz Yisrael, the gap was the largest between the old Yeshuv, which was ultra-Orthodox and totally closed to any modern influence. And on the other side, you had the new Yeshuv, which was becoming very, very opposed to religiousness, to belief. So he saw here and there was no connection between these two groups, only hostility, mutual hostility. He saw here the full ugliness of this rift. And he set his face to mount the public platform and to work for the benefit of his people with all his strength and deed. With his printing press, he prints and prints in various forms for different audiences his ideas according to available funds. Rav Kook was always at a lack of funds, and therefore some of his publications took 100 years till they were printed. And in his scholarly language, he speaks and speaks with all whom he finds worthy. Meaning, he's writing to different audiences. He has something he wants to say to the religious people. He also has something he wants to say to the non-religious people. And he has a message for everybody. Meaning he doesn't feel that he exactly belongs specifically to one of these groups. Though he was clearly religious, So he wasn't secular, and he was clearly close to the right wing, and became stronger with Rav Tzvi himself. So apparently he wasn't, but in his core feeling, he didn't feel like he belonged to any specific group. He belongs to Klal Yisrael, and he has his way of thinking, and he wishes to share this way for different audiences. Every audience might be stronger in one thing, but weaker in another, and he wants to strengthen every audience, every group with what it needs strengthening in. So he speaks and speaks with all whom he finds worthy, rising early to speak, rising early to write. In Hebrew, Hashkem v'daber, Hashkem v'katov. Wait a minute, how is it exactly? Hashkem v'daber, Hashkem v'chatov. Getting back to the English, you have in your source sheets both the Hebrew and the English. And despite the many who disturb him, especially from the old generation, meaning Rav Kook in 1908, the big machloket against him would begin in 1920, 21, when he becomes the Rav of Yerushalayim and of all of Eretz Yisrael, and when he publishes his more, strong views in the book Orot. But in 1908, he was already being considered a troublemaker in the eyes of the zealots. Last time I mispronounced that word and said zealots. They're zealots. I hope I'm not pronouncing it correctly. And they understood that Rav Kook, though he is clearly a tremendous Talmid Chacham, he's not a regular one. He's not speaking the way that we speak. He gave that hesped, which wasn't exactly a hesped, but to Herzl in 1904, and there were other things, and his way of chinuch. In Yerushalayim, he was already considered problematic in the eyes of the zealots. This will become stronger in later years. So he says he has many who disturb him, especially from the old generation, and yet he has already managed to accomplish much, relatively speaking. So that, for example, the Talmud Torah here in Jaffa, which they took under his patronage, I think he took, it should say, he has already established a workshop to teach the children handicrafts. That's what we call today in the world of religious Zionism, Torah ve'avodah, meaning you combining your Torah study with something that will allow you to practically take part in practical life and have a job and a salary. And Rav Kook wasn't opposed, by the way, to the idea of pure Talmud Torah. He just understood that for most of the population, this wasn't the way to go. Most people should combine, and therefore he established a workshop to teach the children handicrafts. One who dwells in the land and sees the situation knows how great, as you, Brenner, do, knows how great this step is, because the Yeshuva Yashan, they had a cherem against learning any secular studies and learning foreign languages, and therefore to have a Talmud Torah in which you also have anything that's considered secular, that was a big chidush. And Rav Kook said, their cherem is only relevant to Yerushalayim, and here in Jaffa and the Moshavot, we can have a different educational system. We're allowed to have it, and he gave it a place. And the individual young people have responded to his call, also abroad, and his influence on the new generation is very great, as they recognize his special worth. They also understood that this is a different kind of rabbi. By the way, even when he got off the boat, making Aliyah in Iyar 1904, he started speaking Hebrew. They never saw a rabbi speaking. It was very important for the Zionists to speak Hebrew and not Yiddish or foreign languages, and he was speaking Hebrew. They never saw a rabbi speaking that language. And he stands like a central pillar between the two sides and plants good in each one and seeks to bring them closer to each other and to make them know one another. And the pinnacle of his work, understanding the essence of Judaism and its details together with its interpreters and explicators. I actually checked out how to pronounce that word because, like I said last time, my English isn't perfect. Let's see if I did it right, correctly. Oh, wait a minute, I have this turned off. Let me turn it on.
Explicator.
I did it. Yeah, explicator. Great. I managed to pronounce a word I don't know well. Explicators. And back to the letter. And for this purpose, he composed the precious book Eder HaYakar, written about his father-in-law, the Aderet, and especially this book. They were printed together, Eder HaYakar and Nikvei Atzon. Especially this book being sent to you. This book I divided into two parts. One directed to the old generation, containing articles. Look, we're in a shortage of time here. It takes me longer to give this shiur in English than in Hebrew. I just want to mention from this paragraph that he wrote Ma'amar Hador thinking about the Orthodox world and trying to tell them, make them understand that among our fighting youth, meaning fighting for ideals and values, there's also found in them good. Don't think that because they're fighting for values that aren't Torah-orientated, that means it's all bad. No, there's also good in them. And even among the young Bundists, this is the reason that we're studying this whole letter. This is parallel to what we read in that Igeret in the letter to Milstein, speaking about his sons who were not even Zionists. Rav Kook says here, Rav Tzvira says here specifically that Ma'amar Hador, this essay about the generation, Rav Kook's fundamental ideas about our generations, it's relevant even regarding the Bundists. Who were the Bundists? The Bundists, that was a party in Europe, strong mainly in Poland, and they were opposed to Zionism. They believed in socialist values, and they believed in speaking Yiddish, and that the Jews should stay in their places, and they want to fight for the Jewish population of workers wherever they live. So they ran for the elections in Poland, and like I said, they were totally opposed to Zionism, and they were opposed to religion. And yet we see here specifically that the main ideas of Ma'amar Hador are relevant to the Bundists. So this is very important. It doesn't matter where somebody stands. Of course, if he's more Zionist and more connected to Israel, that's better. But even if he isn't, the things that we're going to study in this series regarding the special mindset, and I would say even soul set, the special neshama of Jews in our generations, this is relevant to all Jews. This is relevant to all groups in Am Yisrael, even those who their connection is weaker. And this is very important, because if you don't understand this, you're going to misinterpret all of Rav Kook's ideas and just turn it into something very narrow. And like I said, you'll think it's not relevant, and therefore you might become too estranged and critical of those who are non-religious and also not very national. And we see this also. I gave you some later passages here, one from 1933, in which Rav Kook writes, we must decide that a hidden force for advancing toward goodness exists in all the camps and in all individuals of the nation. If you believe in Klal Yisrael, if you believe in the neshama of Klal Yisrael, you should understand that it encompasses all of the camps, all of the individuals, and especially in all those for whom the general value of Israel and its hope are precious in whatever measure. Meaning, again, like we said, there is a difference. Of course, if these are people who feel strongly about Zionism, Israel, IDF, of course that's better. It's especially in them, but not uniquely in them. Rather, this goodness exists in all. Don't give up on anybody. And if your children are straying away, don't give up on them, even if they're not connected. Of course, it's wonderful if they're at least connected to Zionist values and to Israel, and they love the flag of Israel. But that's not a condition. That's not a condition. At least not in Rav Kook. You know, if you believe otherwise, I always tell people, first of all, don't taint Rav Kook's value system. If you think otherwise, then that's your right. But don't teach Rav Kook in a false way, because what he's writing is relevant to everybody, even those who their connection has become weaker to the national life of Israel. Rav Kook believes in their neshama, believes in the goodness in their soul, and he believes that we should understand and teach ourselves, not only them, but teach ourselves as well, that at least in the foundation, the core values that they believe in, it is connected to Torah, and Torah is broad enough to encompass all of that. Last source here was written in the summer of 1934, a year and 2 months before Rav Kook passed away. Of course, he didn't know that he was going to pass away, but this is like from the beginning of Rav Kook's term in Eretz Yisrael, and also from the end of it. Here he's writing in this letter. We don't have enough time to give the whole background about this letter, but there was a lot of machloket between the right and the left back then regarding the murder of Chaim Arlozorov, which is a bit similar to what happened to us after the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin. The left felt that all the right wing was to blame for it, and Rav Kook was protecting 3 people who were arrested, and they were suspected to be the murderers, and Rav Kook knew that they were not the murderers, and he fought for their release, and the left was very angry with him because they thought that they were the murderers, and it was a whole mess. And this was the background in a nutshell to this letter, in which he says, "From the source of my heart that aches over the brokenness of my people, I will respond to your honor regarding your precious letter. I call upon heaven and earth to witness that my love is great, truly with all my heart and all my soul, for our entire people, and for their individual parts, and for all their factions." Why? Because this isn't just a merely sentimental thing. It's because I believe with complete emunah, with complete faith, that every part of them is a special limb in the measure of the holy and wondrous stature that is the entire assembly of Israel. I'm going to translate this to Knesset Israel, because you can't call it Assembly of Israel, Knesset Israel. This is a Kabbalic oriented term. We can't get into it now, but we're going to discuss it more at length in the future shiurim in this series. But Rav Kook says basically that Knesset Israel is the whole personality of Am Yisrael throughout the generations, and every part of Am Yisrael is a limb in Knesset Israel. So if I love Hashem and I love Knesset Israel, which is Hashem's creation, I have to love all of the different parts and factions. Does this mean that I agree with everything that any Jew says? Of course not. You can't. That's not possible, and it's not sensible. In every faction, therefore, he states, in every faction, in every movement, by the way, even those that I'm closer to, there are certainly things that I cannot agree with, but this cannot cause my love, full of blazing flame, burning within me, for our holy people in all its individual parts, to be damaged even by a hair's breadth. And it stands within me in equal measure. What stands within me? This love for all of Knesset Israel. It stands within me in equal measure for those who honor me and those who despise me. And there were many in that year who despised Rav Kook because of his stance on the trial regarding the murder of Arlozorov. I love them all without constraints. This is, my dear one, the answer of the seal of my heart, which I deliver to you faithfully with feelings of honor and true love. Meaning, I don't belong to a specific party. There are certain parties that I might be closer to. There are certain views that I believe in more, but I'm not kicking anybody out of the camp of the Jewish nation. On the contrary, every group, every faction, they have their place. I have certain things that I think they might have to develop regarding to. They might have to change certain things. I have criticism for every group for certain things, but I'm not gonna, the question is, if you put an X on somebody and say he doesn't belong at all, or he has to totally change his personality and his way of thinking for me to see him as a part of us. No, even if I currently disagree with what he's trying to convey and promote, in the core of it, there's a certain value that I can connect to, and maybe I can even wish to study it from him. This is Rav Kook's basic, it's optimistic, it's his basic approach, and this is his message regarding the value system that the Milstein sons are now embracing. And he's actually teaching the father, not only the kids, he's teaching the father, your understanding of Torah needs to broaden, so you will understand what in their belief system is true and correct, and even connected to Kedusha, connected to Torah. This doesn't mean that everything they're doing is okay. Of course, we're opposed to much of it, But the question is not if we're opposed to that goes without saying. The question is if you manage to identify the good that is at the core of their personality and their belief system, and that's what's causing them to be attracted to certain views and ways of life that we don't think are positive. This is Rav Kook. I hope we have helped correct the widespread mistake regarding the teachings of Rav Kook. And next time, Bezrat Hashem, we'll continue with the letter that we began reading today, Kuf Yud Gimel, letter 113. Thank you.